The sea never repeats itself. Every trip is a gamble with fate. And fishermen are gamblers who are never afraid of losing, said an old Japanese fisherman as he checked each mesh of the net on the boat that has been his ship for 30 years. They set sail with hope and return with holds full of spoils, from giant bluefin tuna to schools of mackerel, scad, and needlefish swimming in coils like shimmering silver ribbons in the night sea. Sometimes, they even encounter Sometimes, they even encounter rare and bizarre creatures like giant stingrays or ton-sized sunfish. Each fish has its own story, a part of the deep world that we have never truly understood. Once, I pulled up my net and saw a grouper as big as a small boat. The whole ship was silent for a few seconds because no one believed their eyes, said a young Indonesian captain. His eyes still filled with astonishment. The sound of diesel engines rumbled at dawn. People quietly boarded the ship while astonishment. The sound of diesel engines rumbled at dawn. People quietly boarded the ship while the fog still covered the harbor. The sea is waiting for us. And I have never missed an appointment with the sea, said Mr. Kyoji, a 63-year-old Japanese fisherman, as his calloused hands pulled the last anchor rope onto the deck. The ship began to drift away from shore, gliding on the calm water like a giant green mirror. In front was an ocean stretching to the horizon. Behind was the land gradually shrinking like a memory. In the hold, each hook, each box of bait, each large block of net was neatly arranged. Everything had its own order, like the rhythm of the sea. Today's trip was expected to last 10 days living with the wind and waves, with thousands of fish species that fishermen call the harmony of the ocean. On the first day, after leaving the shallow water, the sonar started working. The cabin monitor detected a large school of anchovies moving in a swirling cluster in the water near the surface. They're like a living cloud. The sonar is buzzing, and you know they're coming, said Takeshi, a young crew member, beaming as he gave the order to drop the net. Anchovies, tiny creatures that are the lifeblood of millions of families. As the net closed, tiny specks of light danced in the water, creating a silver rain. Within 20 minutes, the deck was filled with tiny fish that were thrashing about as if they hadn't accepted their fate. On the second day, the ship headed into deeper waters, once known as the territory of mackerel and tuna. The captain adjusted the angle of the rudder and said, "We don't use GPS to find fish. We use experience. The currents, the patches of seaweed, the salinity, they all tell us something." In the afternoon, they dropped their nets where two currents met. Within hours, the coils began to swell, with a strong said. We don't use GPS to find fish. We use experience. The currents, the patches of seaweed, the salinity, they all tell us something. In the afternoon, they dropped their nets where two currents met. Within hours, the coils began to swell. With a strong jerk, the net was slowly pulled up. Be careful, the hairtail is longer than a person. If it struggles too hard, it will cut your hand. But no one complained. We were born to smell the sea. Hiroshi, a net remover, said while sorting the fish with a small knife. At dawn, the sonar siren sounded loudly. There is a school of pompano moving near the surface. The captain shouted. Immediately, everyone ran to the port side. They threw the floating net in an arc, creating a barrier under the water. Less than 30 minutes later, At dawn, the sonar siren sounded loudly. There is a school of pompano moving near the surface. The captain shouted. Immediately, everyone ran to the port side. They threw the floating net in an arc, creating a barrier under the water. Less than 30 minutes later, the pompano, with pectoral fins as long as bat wings, began to leap out of the sea. Trying to get past the net, they were like as he lifted each cage onto the deck. On the fifth day, they headed for colder waters. Thermal sensors indicated that a cold current was flowing from the Arctic, ideal for hunting sauri, herring and sardines. At noon, when the sea became eerily calm, they dropped hooks hundreds of meters long to the bottom. We call it the silent drop. The calmer the sea, the more fish, said one of the linemen, his eyes fixed on the end of the line. Soon, the line began to jerk. Sauri with razor-sharp teeth were pulled up, along with sardines with a strong smell of sea oil, soft and silvery like metal. On the sixth day, they crossed the deepest part of the journey. The area is famous for its giant bottom fish, croaker, grouper, and even rarer species like starfish and stonefish. I once saw a grouper as big as a 200-liter barrel. Lying still under the net like a defeated king, said Yamato, who specializes in handling large fish. Here, they use a layered net system, a technique that allows multiple layers of nets to be dropped into different water levels to catch multiple species at once. When they pulled up, a vivid picture appeared: bright red croaker, dark black grouper, flat flounder as flat as a plate, gray stingray weighing tens of kilos. On Saturday, they changed direction to the south, where the water was warmer. This was the territory of tropical fish, red snapper, amberjack, goby, snapper, cobia. We always look forward to Saturday, because the fish here are as colorful as a festival, said a Vietnamese fisherman as he flipped each red snapper. As soon as the net was pulled up, The fish were jumping around. Some of the amberjacks were so big that 2 people had to carry them to put them in the bucket. The cobia were long and slender like spears, with dark skin that shone purple-blue. The 8th day was a special day, tuna hunting. They prepared fishing lines several kilometers long with hooks larger than their hands. Tuna fishing is an art. You have to know when the fish will bite, and when it is just teasing you, said an old Korean fisherman as he applied sunscreen to his face. In the late afternoon, a loud cry rang out, "It's bitten!" The whole boat rushed into a battle of pulling was pulling the line taut as if it wanted to sink the whole boat. After nearly 40 minutes of struggling, it was pulled up, its eyes still fierce, its body covered in scratches. On the 9th day, they returned to the waters closer to shore to catch small fish, mackerel, herring, anchovies, and scads. The nets were dropped close to the surface of the sea, and after only a few hours, dozens of tons of small fish were scooped up like silver streams. We call it the day of numbers. Not big, but too many to count, Takeshi said as he scooped the fish into plastic buckets. Day 10, the day of return. The ship turned toward the mainland. The refrigerated holds were filled with dozens of species of fish. On deck, fishermen laughed as they recounted the struggles of the fish and the bites they received. While unhooking their hooks. The sea has always taught us one thing: patience, respect, and never underestimate the smallest creatures. Captain Kyoji said as the ship began to see the lights of the harbor as the ship neared land. The smell of the sea began to fade, replaced by the smell of earth, of trees, and of the city slowly emerging in the distance. But for the fishermen on board, the sea had not really left. They were still working, still They were still working, still busy processing the last catch, sorting, packing, and making ice. In the small cabin, the radio played an old song. The sea breeze carries me home, but my heart is still anchored in the waves. When you've been out at sea for 10 days, you realize that land is just a place to rest. The real life is out there, smiled an old fisherman named Koichi, wiping his sharp knife after finishing a huge grouper. On deck, each box of fish, weight, storage temperature, date and time of catch. The fishermen worked like a pre-programmed machine. They know exactly which fish need to be kept on their scales and which need to be treated before being put into the cold storage. Some boxes are even separated. Rare species like sunfish, pufferfish, and snapper, and are chosen to be shipped directly to high-end restaurants. We don't just catch fish, we also have to understand them. Which species are perishable, which species need to be kept on a separate ice layer, and even the way the fish are placed in the box has to be oriented correctly. says a Thai crew member named Santi, as he carefully places each codfish on the crushed ice. What follows is a non-stop process: scaling, gutting, removing organs, cleaning, and wrapping in specialized nylon. Some young fishermen take the opportunity to learn to do it right. Our fish can go straight to the dining table in Tokyo or Paris, says a Vietnamese fisherman, his eyes shining with hope. As the sun began to set behind the distant mountains, the sunlight shone on each fish scale, making the deck look like it was gilded. At this time, the captain began to count the journey: more than 40 tons of anchovies, 30 tons of herring, 25 tons of hairtail, 12 tons of mackerel, nearly 50 tuna, hundreds of groupers, flounder, red snapper, cobia, all forming a list nearly 2 pages long. A fisherman's 2 hands can pull up the whole world from the bottom of the sea. Captain Kyoji whispered as if talking to himself. The last night on the ship was an unusually quiet night. No one mentioned big waves, torn nets or running fish. Instead, there were laughter, hot cup told in soft voices as if afraid of waking up the sea. Tomorrow, the fish will go to the market, to the supermarket, to the dining table, but how many people know that it has swum through thousands of miles of water, cut the hands of the net removers, and tilted the deck of the ship because of its weight? Yamato muttered while looking up at the starry sky. The next morning, when the ship docked, the fishing port was like a bustling beehive. Refrigerated trucks were waiting. The warehouse owners were checking the goods, weighing, negotiating. The fishermen did not rest. They carried the fish boxes down while instructing the loading workers. The warehouse owners were checking the goods, weighing, negotiating. The fishermen did not rest. They carried the fish boxes down while instructing the loading workers. We can only feel secure when the last fish box is loaded safely, Takeshi said, sweat soaking his back. The atmosphere on the shore was completely different from the sea. There was haste. There were car horns. There were lights and cold handshakes. But in the hearts of every fisherman, there was still the echo of the drifting days, of the sound of waves hitting the boat, of the salty smell. Different from the sea, there was haste. There were car horns, there were lights and cold handshakes. But in the hearts of every fisherman, there was still the echo of the drifting days, of the sound of waves hitting the boat, of the salty smell in the air. Fish is not just food. It is life. It is the breath of life for those who go out to sea, said Mr. Kyoji before stepping off the boat, still clutching his worn-out baseball cap. At the end of the day, the group of fishermen dispersed in different directions,